News now, and we're coming on the air with breaking news out of Missouri, where an Amtrak train has derailed. There are early reports of injuries. Those details are coming in and they're coming up. And a country divided by abortion access laws, with new lawsuits trying to block some of the bans that went into place after the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And we'll show you new polling that showed Democrats are, in fact, motivated to vote. And many are demanding President Biden take action. Plus, WNBA star Brittney Griner learns that she will go before a Russian court on Friday. Well, we're hearing now from the State Department on her detention, but not about a potential prisoner swap. And the January 6th committee is adding a surprise new hearing tomorrow because of recently obtained evidence. What we know. Plus, in tonight's original, emergency room doctors in Houston are accusing their employer of forcing them to work with COVID and not take tests. We'll give you their story and the company's response. And two of the biggest superstars in tennis are back on the court this week. In Wimbledon, we're going to break down why the stakes are so high for Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams later in the show. Hey there, I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie, and we are starting with new legal battles happening today in states across the country after the Supreme Court eradicated the constitutional right to abortion. At this moment, there is a hearing in Utah for an attempt to block that state's trigger law. And in Louisiana, a state court temporarily blocked that law there. Abortions can immediately resume in Louisiana after they were abruptly stopped on Friday. With Louisiana off the list for now, there are 11 states with laws that now mostly or entirely ban abortion. Another 10 will have bans and restrictions going into effect soon. And legal battles are already starting there. Take Florida. Providers there want a state court to block a new law limiting abortion beyond 15 weeks before it even goes into effect, saying it violates the Florida Constitution's broad right to privacy. Some states are also moving to protect abortion rights. A national coalition of 22 attorneys general reaffirming the right to abortion in their states, saying, quote, "We refuse to go back to the days of politicians trying to tell people what to do with their bodies." And as the fight moves to the states, protesters are still taking to the streets, some anti-abortion, but most in support of the right to abortion. This is a look at some across the country this weekend, from my hometown, Denver, to Atlanta, New York, outside of the Supreme Court here in Washington. Pete Williams is here to break all of this down. Pete, we mentioned Utah and Louisiana. There's also lawsuits underway in Texas and Idaho, Arizona, Kentucky, Ohio. Break down the different legal strategies being taken really across the country.
So there are 8 states now we know of where there are lawsuits pending, Tom, and they come in different categories. The Louisiana one, for example, seems to be in a class by itself. The lawsuit there claimed that there were 3 separate trigger laws, and they were all different, and it wasn't clear exactly what was allowed and what was not allowed, and the judge has put all the trigger laws on hold and has scheduled a hearing for next Friday. There's a separate claim in Florida, for example, that says the state's ban violates the freedom of religion. But I think for the most part, these lawsuits challenging the ban say this. Yes, we know that the U.S. Constitution has said there's no right, or the Supreme Court, rather, has said there's no right to abortion under the federal Constitution. But these lawsuits claim that nonetheless, the right is protected by various provisions of the state constitution. You mentioned the privacy protections in Florida's Constitution. The lawsuit in Utah says that that Constitution gives much greater protection to family decisions, family planning decisions. So there are a host of claims that are being made that the state constitutions nonetheless protect the right to abortion, even if the U.S. Constitution does not.
Okay, and we also got a ruling today, the Supreme Court siding with a public school football coach who wanted to pray on the 50-yard line after his team's games. So give us the big picture here on how this, plus the abortion ruling, are playing into this blurring of the lines between church and state and the impact it might have.
So the coach is Joseph Kennedy from Bremerton, Washington, an assistant football coach who did, in fact, pray on the 50-yard line after games. The school said you have to find a more private place to do that because otherwise it looks like the school district is endorsing your religious views. But today, by a vote of 6-3, The Supreme Court said, no, that's wrong, that the coach was acting in his private capacity. The game was over. He was no longer in charge of his players, and therefore he was protected as an individual by free expression and freedom of religion. The dissenters said he's still a coach. He had the whistle on. He had the uniform on. The students may have felt compelled or coerced to join him in these prayers, and that's what they want to try to avoid, is that kind of coercion. So it does lower the separation, Tom, you're right, between the separation of church and state. But I don't think it opens the door to prayer in the classroom, because the court made this distinction saying he was acting in his private capacity, not in his official capacity as a coach. And certainly a teacher in the classroom would be acting in an official capacity.
But real quickly, Pete, under that argument, then they could allow the whole town to come and pray on the 50-yard line, right? And that's public school property.
Well, they would, if they're allowed on the field, the court's view, I guess, would be they would be doing it in their individual capacities. That's right. And of course, there wouldn't be the issue of government endorsement there for private citizens. It was the idea of whether somebody acting on behalf of the school is that an endorsement of religion.
Got it. Pete, thank you. Pete Williams in our Washington bureau. The fight over how to protect abortion access is really compounding the political crisis that President Biden is facing right now. At this moment, he's overseas at the G7 summit, working on new ways to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia. The allies that he's sitting down with, like France's Emmanuel Macron and Britain's Boris Johnson, are among those criticizing the U.S. Supreme Court's decision. But back home, Democrats like Senate Health Committee Chair Patty Murray are calling on the president to take bold action to protect access. Polling shows action is something that Americans want. NPR has a poll showing that 78% of Democrats are now motivated to vote. But listen to the anger from one protester who spoke to our Yasmin Vasujian, directed at Democrats.
I received a text message from Joe Biden's campaign yesterday saying that the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade and that it was my responsibility to then rush $15 to the Democratic National Party. And I thought that was absolutely outrageous because my rights should not be a fundraising point for them. If they're going to keep campaigning on this point, they should actually do something about it.
Josh Letterman is right now at the White House, so do something about it. That's the message from Democratic voters, and we're hearing that the president's getting ready for, quote, several relevant government agency announcements. Any idea what that means, Josh?
Well, Tom, for senators like Patty Murray or that young woman that you were just playing who are looking for sweeping action from the White House, I think they're going to be sorely disappointed, because what we are hearing from officials here is that these steps that agencies are expected to take in the coming days and weeks are going to be along the lines of reminding people what existing law already protects, enforcing current protections on the books, to the similar point of what the Health and Human Services Department did today in conjunction with the Treasury Department, as well as the Labor Department. They put out an open letter to major insurance companies reminding them that under law, they have to provide contraceptive care, birth control, to people at no cost. Now, that does not create a right that didn't exist yesterday. That does not ensure the ability for a woman who is in a no abortion state to get an abortion. It simply makes sure that everybody understands what is still protected in federal law and what those agencies will do to ensure that that happens. But these are really steps around the margins. The White House making very clear that when it comes to actually codifying the ability to get an abortion, that is something only Congress can do, and that's why they keep pointing to the politics and to the upcoming election.
Okay, but let's talk for just a minute about any other action that the president might take. His press secretary has already thrown cold water on the idea of expanding the court, right? But progressive Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is urging just that and walking through her other calls to action in a tweet. Among them, opening clinics on federal land. What would that be? A military base? We don't know. Expanding access to Plan C at an at-home abortion pill, and calling on Congress to hold votes to codify the precedents set in cases like Loving and Griswold and others. So these are all things Democrats can do. Is there anything here that we're hearing that the president will do, or at least push Congress to do?
really what we expect the White House to do are the steps they've already taken, which involve trying to ensure the ability for women to cross state lines to seek an abortion, making sure there's wide access to abortion medications. But those steps that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez proposed are not likely to be taken up by this White House. In fact, I just spoke to a White House official, Tom, about that idea that she was proposing to use federal lands to offer abortions. A White House official telling me it's a well-intentioned idea, but is probably not a good one because it would put women and providers at risk, particularly of prosecution if they're not federal employees and they cross onto federal land to get an abortion. What is to stop state police from waiting for them on the other side of the road as soon as they leave federal land and then arresting them? So there are some risks here as well. Some of those laws they want codified, Lawrence v. Texas and others. You know, it's not totally clear when it comes to birth control and same-sex marriage whether Democrats would have the votes to overcome filibusters and be able to put that into law right now. So the White House seeing some of these as long shots that would not necessarily achieve the underlying goals, and that's why they are looking at more modest steps that they feel are within their authority, Tom.
Just a few hot topics to worry about there at the White House, right, Josh? Thanks very much. Josh Letterman at the White House for us. We're getting breaking news out of Missouri. Local authorities there responding to an Amtrak train that appears to have derailed. This happened near the small town of Mendon. It's about 100 miles east of Kansas City. Amtrak says the train was headed from L.A. to Chicago. In a statement, Amtrak says about 243 passengers and 12 crew members were on board, and there are early reports of injuries. Amtrak also says their incident response team has been activated, and they are deploying emergency personnel. The train derailed after striking a dump truck, apparently on the tracks. And this is what we heard from emergency dispatchers about the time of the derailment.
On Highway 11, then west to Forest Prairie, we have an Amtrak derailment, multiple injuries, multiple fatalities. Requesting all available units respond.
We have no confirmation of fatalities at this hour. Jesse Kirsch following all of this for us. Jesse, what are you hearing right now?
Yeah, and just to reiterate that right there, Tom, all we know at this point from Amtrak, early reports of injuries, that's what they are saying. And we have that new information just coming in about what exactly derailed here. So we now know from Amtrak it was 2 locomotives and 8 train cars. We're trying to get more information. We, of course, are waiting for our affiliates to get to the scene as well. As you mentioned, this is a bit of a distance. It's somewhere between Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Louis. So this is not something that our affiliate just got to right away. So we're trying to get more information from them. We know that there's state police who are out there. We do know from one area hospital there in Missouri that they have received 3 patients related to this derailment. They wouldn't go any further than that, but they did acknowledge that they have 3 patients. So we know of at least 3 injuries that required people being brought to the hospital, Tom.
Yeah, and we believe that, again, this was a truck of some sort that was on the tracks. It's now the second incident involving Amtrak and a vehicle in just as many days, right? We have one out in California.
Yeah, and there is a key difference here. So first of all, this is a derailment. Amtrak is confirming that its rail cars have derailed. The other incident, which happened in Northern California, that involved a train hitting a car that was trying to cross the tracks, according to authorities. In that incident, the train did not derail. 3 people were killed in the car in that incident. However, as far as we understand, everyone on the train was okay. So difference in how this played out, but kind of underscoring again the risk involved when vehicles are in the way of the train coming through on the tracks, regardless of who is at fault in that situation. And Tom, you might remember as well, as soon as I heard Chicago tied to this, it also reminded me of an Amtrak train back in September, which derailed. And in that incident, that was a train also that was going to be that was derailed in Montana, that was tied to Chicago train station. And that Amtrak train, in that incident, unfortunately, according to authorities, 3 people were killed. And at this point, in this incident, all we have are early reports of injuries. But this is something that we, of course, are going to be watching very closely with, again, 8 rail cars said to have derailed there, Tom.
I've covered a lot of train crashes, and it goes without saying, but we'll say it. A train can't stop. So playing chicken with a train just really doesn't make sense. Jesse, thanks. Jesse Kirsch. In quite a turn of events for those of us here in Washington today, the January 6th committee announced it will be holding a last-minute public hearing tomorrow afternoon to present, quote, new evidence and witness testimony. To be clear, we don't know what this hearing is really going to be all about, but the committee did indicate that there will be a new witness, but not saying exactly who that might be. The announcement coming as a big surprise because Chairman Benny Thompson said that the next public hearings would not be until July, citing an influx now of new evidence and witness testimony that they need to work through. Joining me now is Sahil Kapoor. So, Sahil, everybody is intrigued. Any idea who we're talking about, who this might be?
No idea at this point, Tom. I could only speculate, and I would rather not do that at this moment. This committee's advisory raises more questions than answers at this moment. They say simply that the hearing is going to be tomorrow at 1 p.m., and they will, quote, present recently obtained evidence and receive witness testimony. Now, what is that evidence going to be? Who is this witness going to be? Why did they reverse course after last week and decide that in the middle of a recess week to hold a hearing? Why did they do it with only 24 hours notice? And why aren't they revealing the identity of this new witness? These are all unanswered questions right now. And in the past, the committee has given more notice of these hearings, well over 24 hours, and it has noted the name of the witnesses in these advisories. So for reasons known only to the committee at this moment, the identity of this person is being kept under wraps. And it appears that the committee has stumbled upon or come by information just in the last few days since last week that has motivated it to hold this hearing tomorrow and get this information out. I should say also, in the middle of a very jam-packed news cycle that includes the elimination of Roe versus Wade, the expansion of Second Amendment gun rights, carrying firearms in public, as well as the most significant piece of gun safety legislation Congress has passed in 3 decades. This committee must believe it's got something pretty big here to want to compete with all of that.
Well, that's exactly the point. Are they trying to regain the initiative or you know, the news headlines because they kind of lost it right away, given the Roe versus Wade decision and everything that's happened in Ukraine and everywhere in the world?
Well, it's far from clear that they can, regain too many of those headlines while these big news stories are in the works. Nothing is going to distract a significant portion of Americans from the fact that Roe versus Wade is eliminated. If you care about that, then that's still going to be on your mind whether or not this hearing comes about. But that doesn't seem to be the motivation of this committee, Tom. And I'll say that on the basis of the fact that a source familiar with this hearing told our NBC colleagues Scott Wong and Peter Nicholas that this was an unplanned hearing, that the committee is getting new information on just about a daily basis. And they said, quote, you can deduce from that there will be a lot of significance to this hearing, unquote. So expect something new, expect, at least in the view of this committee, something very important to be unveiled tomorrow.
He's plugged in, this guy, Sahil Kapoor. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Talk to you later. Come back to us if you hear who it is, all right? You can watch tomorrow's hearing live, 12:30 p.m. Here on NBC News Now. A couple of hours ago, the State Department responded to a Russian court setting the date now for WNBA star Brittney Griner's criminal trial for this Friday, July 1st. It says that they have, quote, no higher priority than the safety and security of U.S. citizens overseas. Here, Griner was getting escorted by police in Moscow as she appeared for a preliminary hearing. Today, the court also extended her detention for another 6 months. She will also stay in custody throughout the entire trial. It's coming at a time where we've really seen support ramp up for the U.S. to work harder to free her. At this point, she's been in Russian custody for 4 months already. Russian prosecutors say she had a vape cartridge or more than one vape cartridge containing cannabis oil in her luggage at a Moscow airport back in February. Again, that's what the Russians say. She could be looking at 10 years in prison. Steve Patterson joining me now. So, Steve, we finally have a date now for Griner's criminal trial for the end of the week, and it seems like the odds are against her. What are her chances of getting acquitted on this?
Yeah, Tom, I don't think it's hyperbole to say it's extraordinarily low. Think slim to none. The U.S. is already posturing with the idea that the Russian government isn't really interested in justice in this particular case. But even outside of the geopolitics of this case, the reporting is that fewer than 1% of defendants in Russian criminal cases are acquitted. And unlike the U.S., acquittals can and will in many cases be overturned. So the feeling is if Griner hopes to return to her wife and her life here in the U.S., it isn't going to be through the Russian court. Tom?
Yeah, and the State Department responded today saying that they have no higher priority than trying to get her free, but there was no mention of a prisoner swap, and it's coming as we're seeing this pressure campaign from the public really ramp up on this administration right now, right? Because you're not going to pressure Putin into doing it, that he doesn't care what the WNBA thinks. The question is whether Biden and the administration might be able to respond in some sort of an exchange.
Yeah, that's right. So since then, we've seen it in a big way. You know, essentially, since the State Department classified her detention as wrongful, Griner's family has come out. The people representing her case here in the States are clearly doing everything, all that they can to draw attention to it. There was even a resolution that passed to free her in the House. Athletes like Steph Curry, LeBron James keep bringing her name up in interviews. So it's to the point now where it's common knowledge around the dinner table. And so the administration has to be feeling that pressure. And while we haven't heard anything officially about a prison swap or a prisoner swap, the guidance from experts is that is exactly what Russia is looking for. The word is, in a case like this, that the trial and eventual conviction are kind of part of the process meant to show at least the veneer of justice before any real negotiations begin. So the problem is that Russia is likely to ask for a prisoner who has committed disproportionate crimes to smuggling a vape pen. So that's even more pressure on the Biden administration to try to make the right decision here, Tom.
Yeah. Steve, thank you. Always good to see you. Steve Patterson in L.A. A local governor is saying at least 13 people had been killed at a mall in Ukraine today after it was hit by a Russian missile strike. It happened in the country's central region. Emergency workers there going through fires and smoke to get to people and get people to ambulances. Again, this was a mall, so Ukrainian President Zelensky says about 1,000 people were inside the mall at the time, presumably just shopping at the time. This is when it went down. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken saying the world is horrified by Russia's strike today and that the U.S. will continue to hold Russia to account. It comes as President Zelensky also reportedly called on G7 leaders to help end the war with Russia, quote, by the end of the year. Ellison Barber joining us now with details from Kyiv. Ellison, what more do we know about this attack on the mall? And I'm really curious, since you're there, has it shifted the mood there in Kyiv at all?
And it has, especially since it's coming on the heels of a number of missile strikes happening in Kyiv just 24 hours ago. Look, what we understand right now is that at least 2 missiles hit this shopping center in central eastern Ukraine this afternoon. 1,000 people were believed to be inside the mall at the time of this strike. We have heard reports from the ground saying that people were inside screaming as walls were collapsing around them. And the images that are coming out of this city, you see people just rushing out of the mall as the building behind them is engulfed in flames. Right now, we are being told that at least 13 people have died. At least 40 people are injured. But those numbers, Tom, are unfortunately expected to increase because search and rescue efforts, they are still ongoing. This city, Kremenchuk, it is a community that really hadn't seen a lot of missile strikes of late. In May and June, there was an oil refinery here, one of the largest oil producers in Ukraine, that was struck by a number of Russian missiles. It is still inoperable today, but this, for a lot of people, seemed to come out of the blue. President Zelensky tonight is saying that what happened here is a terrorist attack. He says that there was no military or strategic reason for this mall to be targeted. He says it was just people inside trying to live a normal life. Tom?
So that really raises the question whether this is just an intimidation strike. I mean, you got the G7 meeting at the same moment, and whether Putin is trying to send a message. There's no strategic value in attacking a shopping mall.
Yeah, so Ukrainian officials, particularly when it came to the airstrikes we saw here in Kyiv over the weekend, they were saying that they thought this was some sort of warped show of force where Russia was trying to intimidate Ukrainian citizens and also put pressure on leaders at the G7 summit as they were considering additional sanctions against the Russian Federation. I mean, all of this is happening, though, as the fighting in the east just continues to rage on. And Russia has made a lot of grounds on the eastern front lines of late. 2 days ago, that key city, Severodonetsk, fell to Russian forces. There are civilians who were inside a chemical plant in that city. Right now, according to the media outlet that is controlled by the so-called People's Republic of Luhansk, the Russian-backed group there, they're saying that some people have been evacuated to where? We don't know. Before, there were talks about how they were trying to get people to leave, but they were only willing to evacuate them into Russian territory, which Ukrainian citizens did not want to do. Right now, on the Eastern Front, there is only one city that stands between Russian forces and them taking the entire Luhansk region, and that's the sister city of Severodonetsk, Lysychansk. So the UK's Ministry of Defense has said that in addition to pouring all of their resources, all of their ground personnel into this fight on the east, they've also mobilized the majority of their reserve units. So you still have them just hammering these communities all along the eastern side of Ukraine. And now they're also launching, it appears, a significant amount of missiles into these civilian areas, like we saw this weekend in Kyiv and now with this shopping mall. Tom?
Ellison, thank you. Ellison Barber, who's in Kyiv for us. Thank you very much. Coming up, Ghislaine Maxwell, placed on suicide watch ahead of her sentencing hearing. We'll have the prosecutors and the defense lawyers conflicting accounts of what's really going on. And more trouble in the skies. Hundreds of flights canceled today as we head toward the long 4th of July weekend. What you can expect if you're traveling this week. Stay with us. Back now, and we're learning that Jeffrey Epstein's former confidant and convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, is on suicide watch ahead of her sentencing tomorrow in New York. But there are two different accounts of what's really going on. Now, one of Maxwell's lawyers says she is not suicidal. She wrote to the court Saturday saying Maxwell had been removed from the general population at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn and that she was given a suicide smock. Prosecutors say Maxwell herself emailed the Bureau of Prisons Inspector General Friday to tell them that she feared for her safety and that Maxwell's, quote, inconsistent accounts to the IG and psychology staff raise concerns that she is at risk for self-harm. Tom Winter has been following this development. Tom, a little confusing here, a lot to unpack. What else have we learned from the filing?
Right, Tom. So this has been going back and forth for the past several days, and basically you have at different times over the course of the entirety of her custody, Ghislaine Maxwell raising questions about her treatment, that she's been singled out. Of course, her former confidant was arrested and charged. We're speaking about Jeffrey Epstein, and then died by suicide just about a month and a half after he was taken into custody. So the scrutiny on Maxwell and her time at the MDC, which is a different jail facility located across the river from Manhattan in Brooklyn, has been under scrutiny since day one. She's been subjected, according to her, to every 15 minutes being checked on by prison staff, as well as being limited in her interaction with other inmates. That has since changed following her conviction, and so she's been out in general population, and now she says that she has concerns about her safety. It is likely that at least through the day tomorrow, Tom, and perhaps beyond that, she'll be on more of a modified suicide watch without that smock, as you suggested.
Okay, well, remind us how much time she's facing once she's sentenced. And also, one of her lawyers says that they were considering asking for a delay in the sentencing because Maxwell could not review necessary legal documents, right? So kind of walk us through those two things if you could.
Right. Addressing the last thing first, apparently that's been remedied. So she does have access to her notes in a writing instrument, according to court filings and the Bureau of Prisons. So she's okay on that front, Tom. As far as tomorrow's proceedings go, they're scheduled to start at 11 a.m. We're going to hear from 6 of Maxwell's victims. That is still on schedule, on time. So there's no indication that there'll be any delay there. The stakes are quite high for Maxwell. She faces 30 to 60 years approximately in prison and effectively amounts to a life sentence for the 60-year-old. So significant penalties. That's at least what the prosecutors are asking for tomorrow. We'll see what Judge Allison Nathan decides to do here, Tom, but it's not looking good for Maxwell's future.
Okay, Tom. Thanks very much. Tom Winter in New York. Let's get you now over to the 5 things that our team thinks you got to know about tonight. Number 1, 22 young people have died. 4 remain in critical condition after a mysterious tragedy struck a South African nightclub. The victims were celebrating the end of their exams at a tavern before they suddenly died. Authorities are investigating what caused the deaths, but say a toxicology report will need to be done. The youngest, just 13 years old. Number 2, a U.S. Navy destroyer that sank in World War II has become the deepest shipwreck ever discovered. The wreck was found in 2 pieces off the coast of the Philippines at a depth of more than 4 miles. The Navy destroyer Sammy was engaged in the largest sea battle of World War II with Japan. Number 3, 400,000 solar-powered umbrellas sold at Costco have been recalled for risk of fire and burn injuries. There have been at least 6 reports of the lithium batteries overheating, 3 of which caught fire indoors. Costco is asking anybody who has purchased the umbrella to return it for a full refund. Number 4, the remains of a nearly 30,000-year-old baby woolly mammoth discovered in northwestern Canada. Look at that. Uncovered by miners digging through the permafrost on the Eureka Creek in the Yukon. Now, authorities say it's the most complete and best preserved woolly mammoth ever found in North America. And number 5, Top Gun Maverick has surpassed $1 billion worldwide, becoming only the 2nd movie of the pandemic era to do so. And it's Tom Cruise's first time to reach that milestone. The movie earned another $30 million in its 5th weekend since its domestic release. A bad sign if you've got 4th of July travel plans. Coming up with more mass flight cancellations over the weekend and into today, and then into the week. Over 800 flights across the country canceled today. That's after more than 2,000 were canceled Friday through Sunday. With 3.5 million people expected to travel by air this holiday weekend, coming up to a record, really. And according to AAA, how are airlines and officials trying to get hold of all of this? Right now, the FAA and airlines are pointing fingers kind of at each other, back and forth, blaming each other. We know the airlines have been dealing with staffing shortages, from the pilots to flight attendants to air traffic controllers, after travel demand bounced back much faster than they were ready for. CNBC's Leslie Joseph joins us now to talk about what comes next. Leslie, the airlines and the FAA expect this 4th of July weekend to be the busiest in 3 years, really a test for the airlines. I've been talking to the FAA and the DOT. I know you're talking to the airlines. What are you hearing?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you. We are, like you said, staffing issues are a really big deal for airlines right now. And what that means is that we have a lot of people traveling. This is a very popular holiday in the best of times when airlines are more staffed. But that low staffing that they're grappling with coming back from the pandemic is not equipped to handle the sheer number of passengers that are flying. And another thing to remember is that passengers or travelers are going into a kind of a smaller field. We're talking about mostly United States domestic travel, whereas in 2019, people were a bit more spread out. We had a lot more international travel, and it's we're seeing a lot of demand into Florida. That's a very popular area, and it's really straining the system overall.
Yeah, I talked to DOT today, and they gave me a fascinating stat. In 2019, fewer than 2% of flights were canceled. We're now running at 3.5%, which is really stunning that we've had that big of an increase. And in big airlines like United, Delta, JetBlue, cutting flights from some airports to help with congestion and delays. How long do you think this is going to work? What are you hearing from your sources?
Well, we're hearing that maybe by the fall, which doesn't help anybody for 4th of July or anybody really planning a summer vacation when kids are off from school. But really in the fall, when traffic does start to fall, in normal times, seasonally, kids are back in school, that it should smooth out. That doesn't help anybody who's traveling now. It's not just the cancellations and delays. It's these very long wait times to actually speak to customer service, to get someone even at the airport to help you change change your flight. The options are not there. We kind of equate it to something like a musical chairs in the sky. And there are a lot of trips that really can't be moved. People are traveling, graduation ceremonies and weddings and things that have a very firm date. So what airlines are dealing with now, they're trying to staff up as quickly as they can. But unfortunately, despite that government aid they got, they did encourage, and many workers took them up on this, buyouts, leaves of absence. So they have a training backlog, they have a hiring backlog, and they're trying to get that reversed, but it will take months. And what happens then when there are routine issues like thunderstorms, they have a harder time recovering.
Yeah, they sure do. All right. The lesson here is if you're flying this summer, be prepared to be rescheduled. And so book padding time on each side of your flight. Leslie, thank you. Appreciate your time and your expertise. Coming up, there could be some big economic consequences to denying women abortion access. A look at wealth disparities more women could face now that Roe v. Wade has been struck down. And New York Supreme Court handing down a decision that'll impact elections in New York City. More on that in tonight's Local. Okay, all eyes on Wimbledon of the tennis world. Now, this could be Novak Djokovic's last major tournament of the year due to his vaccination status. Plus, can Serena Williams win again? We're talking about all of that and more coming up. But first, as states begin denying access to abortion, women could be facing a harsh financial reality. Some forced to become parents sooner than planned, affecting their ability to get an education, to keep a job, and cover the cost of childcare. Women who miss out on a college degree because of unplanned pregnancies lose $1.3 million in earnings over their lifetimes. That, according to research from the University of Michigan. While a 10-year study conducted at the University of California, San Francisco, found that women who were denied an abortion were 3 to 4 times more likely to be unemployed and have a household income below the poverty line. Some employers have said that they are stepping in to help. The companies on your screen say they will help cover abortion costs going forward for people, employees in states where abortion is no longer legal. Joining me now, NBC correspondent Jolene Kent. So, Joe, acknowledging that there are plenty of people who are applauding the Supreme Court decision to strike down Roe v. Wade, acknowledging that. We should also make the point, though, that denying abortion access can boil down to financial hardship on the mother. If that mother is on the younger side, it can lead to reduced high school, college graduation rates. And if she can get a job, paid leave is likely not going to be available. And childcare has become pretty expensive. So how does one come to terms with the disparity here and the impact on young women especially?
Well, just look at the data and the research, Tom. Public health experts and economists say the economic impact of abortion bans set to go into effect in those 26 states is expected to be both significant and immediate. The average cost of raising a child is $230,000, according to the Department of Agriculture. And the financial impact here, per the Economic Policy Institute, means the loss of security, independence, and mobility for people who are seeking an abortion in a restricted state. Now, this will, of course, impact low and middle income birthing people the most, especially Black and brown people, Tom.
Yeah. Let's talk about what this means for states' economies as a whole, because a recent study by the Institute for Women's Policy Research estimated that state-level abortion restrictions cost state economies about $105 billion per year because the labor force and earning levels shrink and women are taking time off from work, right? So what kind of effect are these states then looking at in the longer run?
So the stat you just mentioned disproportionately affects birthing people between the ages of 15 and 44 years old. And in that amicus brief that we all read from last year in the Dobbs case, more than 150 economists argued that Roe is causally connected to women's advancement in social and economic life. Now, the International Women's Policy Research Team also found back in 2020 that getting rid of all state-level restrictions would increase the national GDP by nearly 0.5 percentage point. Now, that, of course, came before Secretary Janet Yellen recently said access to abortion rights directly impacts educational levels for birthing people, as well as the future earnings that we've been talking about here. So there is a significant impact on both the state and the national economy. If you talk to the experts about it, that's what they're seeing come out in the data.
All right, now let's say women are able to access an abortion, but they have to drive to another state to get that. And gas prices are at a record high. The distances are long, so the cost of transportation alone has to be overwhelming, right?
Yeah, the distances, Tom, are so daunting. So say you live in Columbia, Missouri. You'd have to drive 128 miles to Granite City, Illinois. That's 2 hours by car. It's about 4.5 hours by 3 buses if you're not driving. And then if you're in Salt Lake City, Utah, for example, another trigger state, you would need to drive 335 miles, and that's 6 hours by car, to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And if you're taking a bus, or public transportation, I should say, that is 19 hours by 1 train and 3 buses. So the hurdles for transportation are enormous in many of these states, Tom.
Yeah. And then come back after you've had the procedure. All right, Joe, thank you. Jolene Kent, thanks very much. Coming up, emergency room doctors suing over unsafe working conditions. In tonight's original, how physicians say profit-driven company officials pressed them to work even though they had COVID symptoms. And Rudy Giuliani says he was slapped while out campaigning for his son. More on that alleged assault in tonight's Local. All right, NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day, and because you couldn't possibly read, watch, or listen to them all, who can? Our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we like to call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, the New York State Supreme Court blocking a law that allows non-citizens to vote in local elections in New York City. Republican lawmakers challenged the measure, saying it was unconstitutional. More than 800,000 non-citizens and dreamers in New York City would have been allowed to vote in the city's municipal elections as early as next year. Also from our Northeast Bureau, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani says he still feels pain after he was allegedly slapped on the back by a supermarket employee on Sunday in Staten Island. He was there campaigning for his son, Andrew, who was now running for governor. The suspect was charged with second-degree assault, according to the NYPD. The suspect's attorney said in a statement that he merely patted Mr. Giuliani and went on without malice. From our Southeast Bureau, 7 people were rescued this weekend after lightning struck their boat 100 miles off the coast of Florida. The group was headed back to shore when an unexpected storm swept in. The Coast Guard came in to airlift all of the passengers off the boat, and thankfully, nobody was injured. Now we want to bring you today's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. When you go to a doctor, like an emergency care facility, you expect that all available precautions are automatically taken for your safety, right? But what if the doctor who's examining you has COVID symptoms and comes to work anyway without getting tested? Well, according to a lawsuit filed in Houston against American Physician Partners, that's a private equity-backed emergency medicine staffing and services provider, that's exactly what happened. The lawsuit alleges doctors were encouraged to not test for COVID-19 and to come to work when they were sick or had symptoms under American Physician Partners management. NBC's Isa Gutierrez has more on this story.
This January, Dr. Sonali Patel says she told her boss at the staffing company she works for she tested positive for COVID-19. In a recent lawsuit, she says he told her to come to work.
I was asked several times and pressured.
Dr. Patel is an emergency department physician at Houston Methodist Hospital.
I decided to take the 5 days.
In doing so, Dr. Patel says she went against the unofficial COVID policy of the for-profit hospital staffing company she works for, American Physician Partners. It provides medical staff to Houston Methodist and other hospitals. She and 7 of her physician colleagues now suing APP, alleging its officials pressed them to work while sick, even if they contracted COVID. NBC News has not independently verified the allegations.
I was ridiculed by the medical director in front of my other colleagues, saying, they're having to cover for me because I was staying home with a sore throat.
It's an approach they say one APP official described as the 4 M's.
Motrin, must not test, mask up, and man up.
A spokesperson for American Physician Partners told NBC News its company policy not to discuss pending litigation and declined to answer our questions about whether its staffing and work policies aimed to boost profits and appeal to investors. According to its website, APP provides emergency department staffing at over 150 facilities in 18 states. The company, founded in 2015, is backed by BBH Capital Partners, the private equity unit of New York investment firm Brown Brothers Harriman. A BBH Capital Partners official declined to comment, citing the litigation.
These companies have a lot of power, and they'll use that because the pressures for profit are so extreme.
More and more private equity firms are getting into healthcare, now owning for-profit staffing companies that oversee an estimated 40% of U.S. hospital emergency departments, according to financial records and academic research.
And they buy out a company with a lot of debt, and all of that debt then gets placed onto the company into an almost impossible situation where they have to expand and generate such high margin profits.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the Houston Methodist Hospital System, which is not part of the lawsuit, said in part the litigation was an internal dispute that had nothing to do with the care provided by the hospital, and that they were unaware of any ER doctor coming to work after testing positive for COVID. The lawsuit against APP, a sign of growing discontent among frontline healthcare workers about for-profit staffing.
You feel like you're just another physician that's filling a spot.
I think situations like this, overworking us, cutting pay, not being valued, not being appreciated, just lead many people to get closer to burnout.
Wow. Issa, so some state legislators in some states are actually proposing bills that would rein in healthcare acquisitions by for-profit and private equity entities. So what does that legislation look like, and what could it mean for staffing companies like American Physician Partners?
Yeah, Tom. So just a couple of weeks ago, state legislators in Pennsylvania proposed a package of new bills to, quote, safeguard the integrity of local healthcare systems and protect patients from suffering the repercussions of greedy and irresponsible hospital schemes carried out by private equity firms, end quote. So one of those bills, Tom, would establish a 2-year moratorium on the transfer of ownership of any health system or hospital in the state of Pennsylvania when it involves a for-profit entity. Another one of the bills that is part of that package is one that would altogether prohibit the ownership of any hospital in Pennsylvania by for-profit entities. So, of course, only time will tell whether these bills will get enough support to become law. But the point here is that states are paying attention and they're trying to do something about this, Tom.
Good reporting there. Thank you, Issa. Thanks very much. Wimbledon is back. And guess what? Novak Djokovic probably playing in his last major tournament of the year. Also, Serena Williams trying to come back from an injury at last year's tournament at the age of 40. Never bet against her. Stay with us. That's coming up next. Wimbledon is back. Matches kicked off today in London, and stakes are high, especially for superstars Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams. For Djokovic, this will be his last Grand Slam tournament this year. He won his first match today in 4 sets. He hasn't gotten vaccinated, though, against COVID, so he will not be able to play in the U.S. Open later this summer in New York. Now, Williams is also making her own comeback to Grand Slam tennis after a year away. She got hurt in her first match of last year's tournament. She'll play her first match tomorrow. The tournament will also have some notable absences. All Russian and Belarusian players banned because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That includes the men's #1 player. His name is Daniil Medvedev. Megan Fitzgerald joins me now. So, Megan, let's now talk through. Let's start with Djokovic because we followed his journey pretty closely this year, the ups and the downs, all the back and forth. He wasn't vaccinated. And now, how important is this now for him? It's his last opportunity for a Grand Slam title, right?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. You know, this is monumentally important. in any year, a normal year, but certainly now, as you mentioned, he's not willing to get vaccinated, and so he understands he likely will not be able to show up at the U.S. Open in New York in the coming weeks. He was deported from Australia. That country, the rules say that he's not able to return for the next several years. So his decision to not get vaccinated, which, by the way, he's doubled down on again, saying that he refuses to do so, is significantly impacting his ability to play in Grand Slams, of course, rank. And so that's why so much rides on his shoulders at Wimbledon, and it's essential for him to win this year. Tom?
All right, now let's talk about everybody's favorite, Serena Williams. She's been out of tennis for a year. She's 40. Yeah. How are people reading her sudden return to Wimbledon and her goal for a 24th Grand Slam title?
Yeah, Tom, people are so excited that Serena Williams is here. She is Serena Williams. And so there's the excitement because a lot of people didn't think that she was going to be able to make it here. But it's like Tiger Woods playing at the Masters. Now, is she going to rank? Is she going to win? Likely not. But again, she's Serena Williams, so of course anything is possible. But if she does happen to come back, because keep in mind she's not played a competitive singles match in over a year. If she wins it all, she would tie with Margaret Court for the 24th Grand Slam title, which is a record, of course, in women's tennis, Tom. So we will see. We will be watching her closely as she takes the court tomorrow for the first time.
I would never bet against her. All right, Megan, when it comes to the tournament's ban on Russian and Belarusian players, that leaves 16 of the top 100 players eligible to compete. They're now ineligible to compete. So how significant is it that so many of them will not be there?
Yeah, it is pretty significant. So the All England club making this tough decision, and of course there's differing opinions on whether or not it was the right one. Djokovic was very outspoken about it, saying that it was a crazy decision. We're talking about two top seed Russians, Daniil Medvedev. Is one of them, the highest ranked player in the world at the moment. There's other 6 Belarusians that were also seeded at this tournament. Now, were any of them favored to win? No. But the impact here is the fact that it significantly impacted the draw. And also, this tournament is not ranked. So, for example, if a player came in, it's at ranked 56 in the world, and then, of course, they do well and move up to 22nd in the world. That's not going to happen this year because Wimbledon is not ranked because of that decision by the All England club, Tom.
Enjoy Wimbledon. When I was a teenager, I snuck in to watch Martina Navratilova, but that's for another day, another story. Megan, thank you very much. All right. We've got breaking news out of Utah. A judge is granting a temporary restraining order that'll block the state from enforcing the abortion ban. This is another trigger law that went into effect after Roe v. Wade got overturned. The restraining order will last at least 14 days. The judge says affected women are, quote, deprived of state, local medical treatments to terminate pregnancies. Utah is the second state now to see its trigger law blocked today after Louisiana offered a similar outcome earlier today. That is a wrap for this hour. We'll have more for you right here tomorrow. Same time, same place. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.